This is an AQA Psychology GCSE revision video for the paper 1 topic of the perception with a specific focus on Gregory's theory. So the first thing you need to know about Gregory's theory is that it contrasts with Gibson's, meaning it's the opposite. Gibson's theory is called the direct theory because Gibson believes that we perceive directly from our environment and therefore that it is nature. Gregory's theory contrasts with Gibson's because he believes that our perception is based on nurture, our experiences. So we construct the world around us. We make a guess about what we're seeing, which comes from our past experiences, and therefore perception is due to nurture, not nature, which is why Gregory's theory is known as the Constructivist theory. He said perception is constructed by filling in the gaps. How we fill in the gaps are through two different ways, both based on experiences. So Gregory's argument is that we have to use our past experiences and our environment, our nurture, in order to perceive correctly, accurately. So we construct our perception through inferences and the use of visual cues. A lot of what we perceive is incomplete and ambiguous. Things aren't always clear when we look at them what an image is. So our brain uses the sensory information, so the visual information on what our eyes can see, which is sometimes correct and sometimes not. So we use inference, we fill in the gaps using an educated guess. So for example, seeing smoke on a dark night, we might infer that to be fire, or someone might infer it as a ghost. It depends on your personal past experiences, your nurture, and how you are ready to perceive the environment around you. And then secondly, visual cues. They help our brain, which is why we sometimes misinterpret visual things, such as visual illusions, because our brain makes the wrong conclusion from the available evidence in front of us using those visual cues that we have. So we base it on past experience. And as we get older, our understanding becomes more sophisticated, our culture, our background, our upbringing, they all influence our perception. So those are the two main things about Gregory's theory and why it's called a constructivist theory. The main points to remember: it's a theory based on nurture. We construct our perception based on the world around us, and the way we do that is through inference, because not everything is as clear as it seems, so we have to infer, make logical assumptions in order to perceive, and we use visual cues, which are our brain's way of helping us understand the environment in front of us. So something to think about, just a little recap of visual illusions. Opportunity now to pause the video and try to answer these 3 questions. I'll go through the answers in 5 seconds. Okay, so this illusion is called the Muller liar. It fools us because of the fins on the arrows, depending on which way they are pointing. So you can see the ones pointing inwards, which are these, they're pointing inwards towards the line. This makes this line appear longer than the fins that are pointing outwards. And so our brain perceives the fins that are pointing inwards as it being further away from us, and so it scales it up and makes that line look longer. This links to Gregory's theory because culture has a massive influence on the way we perceive things. So researchers showed the Muller liar illusion to individuals from non-Western parts of the world. So if you think about teepees, which are typically like triangular shaped and round, there's my little attempt at drawing a teepee. So it's not a square building like in the Western world, like in England or in parts of Europe and America. And what they found was that they weren't fooled by the illusion, whereas people growing up in Europe, America were fooled, and that's because most of our buildings look like this rather than a teepee like that. So this shows actually perception is something we construct based on inference and visual cues from nurture, from our experience, from our upbringing and our culture. And so we can come back to that when we evaluate Gregory's theory. On the other hand, researchers found babies prefer to look at traditional face patterns over something that doesn't look like a face. So babies weren't interested in these images, but they were interested in this if it looked like a face. And these babies were very young, so 2 to 3 weeks old, when their vision is only just developing. So they stared at the image of the face for much longer than other round objects, suggesting that Gregory's theory is actually incorrect, and it's more in support of Gibson, and that babies are born with this ability to perceive, which is why they had the preference for human-like faces. So we can use this as a weakness of Gregory's theory. We can use it as contradictory evidence. So when we're thinking about how we can evaluate Gregory's theory, this is your opportunity to pause the video, think about the examples of visual illusions, the cross-cultural research, and this study in front of you to come up with 3 evaluation paragraphs. I'll go through the answers in 5 seconds. Okay, so here are some evaluation points that you can use for Gregory's theory. One is that it is useful. It helps us to understand visual illusions, such as the Muller-Lyer illusion, which is what we've just recapped. Another strength is that it's got lots of good research support. When you think about the studies you've looked at, like Bruner and Minter, and I have a separate video on that key study if you want to go back to it, but it was about how expectation affected recall, again, showing that it's due to our environment, it's due to nurture, which is what Gregory suggests. And then finally, a criticism is that it is due to nature, not nurture. So you would use Gibson's opposing theory and some contradictory evidence that showed newborn babies or very young infants have the ability to perceive from birth, and they preferred human faces to random patterns. So it suggests that Gregory's theory doesn't explain why we are born with perception, so innate, natural perceptual abilities. And if you don't want to learn that study, you can go back to my Gibson video where you've got the Gibson and Walk experiment, which is a similar one to this study, but it is about the fact that the babies could perceive the edge of the cliff and didn't go any further. Again, showing perception is something that's innate. In order to conclude this video, let's just have a little look at how Gregory and Gibson are similar or different. So we know that Gibson is about nature and Gregory in this video is nurture. Nurture, Gregory, he says sensation and perception are different, whereas Gibson says sensation and perception are the same thing. Gregory can explain how culture influences how we perceive something, that should say, whereas Gibson can't. Gregory can also help us to understand visual illusions, but Gibson can't. However, Gibson can explain why babies are able to perceive accurately, whereas Gregory can't. So that concludes the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it useful.